Hello and welcome. This interview is part of a series of the interview that I'm making with the book Autism and Buddhist Practice, where I'm interviewing the different contributors to the book. And today I'm speaking with Dena. Hello.
Hi.
The interview that I'm making it partly as a support and help to autistic people for them to realize how helpful Buddhism and Buddhist practice is in our everyday life when we just feel like a square peg in a round hole. But the interview series is also made as an educational tool for Buddhist centers and sanghas and communities to learn more about how they can support and help autistic Buddhists and how they can make their Sangha useful and attractive for autistic Buddhists. And today I'm speaking with Dena, and you wrote chapter 11 in the book where you say, "My classroom is my Sangha." And you're very interesting to talk to because you are not autistic. You are working with autistic children. And so the format of the interview is a bit different because you can't obviously tell me about how it was before being diagnosed. So instead, what I would like to ask you is, first of all, about your own Buddhist practice. I would like to talk about the different things that you mentioned in your book, because you have very, very beautiful descriptions of how you implement Buddhism and Buddhist practice with the children, and how you view the autistic children that you work with, as you say, they're small, in their own Buddha nature. I also find it very interesting to speaking with you about this because when we talk about autism, it is a spectrum, and obviously the majority of us who has written chapters as autists have written chapters for the book. We are what is called high functioning, but there are a lot of autistic people that are not high functioning, that the society is deeming as low functioning, which is just horrendous, putting people into brackets like that. But I think it's very important I have always, not always, but I have, since my diagnosis, I have regarded it as very, very important as me as a high functioning autist to make aware about autism. So I'm speaking for all my brothers and sisters that are not able to speak or haven't got a voice in whichever way that it can be. And that's why I find it very important to also talk about all the autists out there that haven't got a voice or can't speak or are not in any way able to communicate. And I'm really looking forward to speaking with you about this, because you have an outside view. You are kind of like the glue between the neurotypical world and the autistic world, and knowing how it is to be an autist, knowing how it is, because you see it every single day, and you have such empathy and awareness with the children that I really, really like. I love reading your chapter. And then you also have, the other side of it, where it's the neurotypical world, knowing how it is, and that is you're representing all the sanghas and Buddhist centers and Buddhist communities by being the person that you are. So I really, really look forward to this interview. But first of all, I would like to hear about your Buddhist practice. How did you end up being a Buddhist?
I think for me, I always knew, and this is my 30th year of teaching. So I'm going to say that even before teaching, I knew that there was something that was deep within that called me to something greater than myself as Dena. But I had no religious background. I grew up in a family that I will say had historical roots as Jews. But it was more of just have some pride in the fact that your family was in concentration camps, and that there was suffering, and that you are of Jewish heritage, but that was as far as it went. And for me, I think when I started teaching, the more experience that I got, the more I recognized there was something that was calling to me from a spirit and a place that was not me. And the more I surrendered Dena to whatever this was, either in the classroom or out, the more things were unraveling and coming towards me. But really, my actual Buddhist practice began 5 years ago over a summer holiday, because for me, time is always going to be a constraint until retirement. There was a mindfulness class at a local Buddhist center, Heartwood Refuge Center in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And I just on a whim decided, well, that would be an interesting way to spend 3 days of quiet for the first 3 days off of summer. And that was really the first intake for me. And it's kind of sprung from there. I remember going back for a Sunday Sangha and talking with my current monastic, Venerable Panawati. And she said, well, then we'll just start seeing you on Sundays. And me saying, well, probably once a month or so, but it's hard for me to commit time because my time frame on Sunday is very small and I have this. She's like, that's great. If you want to continue your path, you continue suffering. And when you're ready, the door is always open. That left it at that. And I love her for it because she and I are very tight and very much alike. And she's a real deal, kind of call it out as you see it woman. And I had the second monastic was Panadipa, who was the yin and yang of those two of them, who was just very quiet and very compassionate and very calm. And he really laid a great foundation because I needed someone who was going to soften and teach me the beginning baseline with an open hand of more compassion before I was ready to really jump into some of the hard roots of you can look at yourself and your own suffering and sit with that. And it's gone from there and it's deepened from there and gotten to, I am now an ordained lay, you would call it a lay reverend, an arachariot, and I'm now an ordained arachariot, and looking how has that training not just helped me, but how do I use that to benefit others? And it's clarified so much of what I always knew was there and let me see even deeper and become a better teacher, a better compassionate being, to be able to have brought Buddhism to the light and understanding of what was always there for me and how I use that to be of benefit to others through discernment and through walking it out in my world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things that I find the most important thing about my practice. It's not so much how well am I doing on the cushion. It's much more how am I implementing it into my everyday life. That's where the Dharma really comes to fruition.
I think the cultivation, the cultivation and the recognition that when the Buddha said you can meditate whether you're sitting, whether you're laying down, whether you're walking, or whether you're standing, that deeper understanding of, oh, wait a minute, from an intellectual pursuit, it means, okay, you can sit down and you can meditate, you can walk and do walking meditation, you can lay down and you can meditate. No, wait, that is surface layer. It's taking that and making what you contemplate a 24/7 cultivation. And that's really where the greater ability to be equanimous and have compassion and use that wisdom and discernment come to really where the rubber meets the road and you're able to be that Bodhisattva of walking it out for self and others.
Yeah.
And until that drops into your space, Pranil, I agree that you're just surface layer and you're a student of, not a participant of true Buddha Dharma.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I had a conversation with Chris, the editor of the book. There's another interview that can be found here on the channel as well, where he had an experience where he felt how a meltdown was coming on, and he then used his Buddhist practice and used the Dharma of being really noticing in his direct experience what is actually happening right now, because there is a level where we are intellectually and egotistically reacting on, and then there's the truth, then there's what is really happening in our direct experience, what is really alive right now. And when we make contact with that, even a meltdown can, because we feel how it's coming on, like I feel with a shutdown, I feel how it's coming on, and then I can use that to get in contact with the body and with my direct experience, what is actually happening right now, what is not, affecting me, but what is really truly happening. And that is exactly what you talk about. Yeah.
And for
Beautiful. Thank
me,
you. Yeah.
I appreciate that, because for me, in the classroom, it's for me to be able to respond versus react, and for me to be able to sense my somatic experience based on when one of my students is about to have a meltdown, and to take myself out of that equation.
Yeah.
And to step back physically. I mean, physically, I sometimes have to step away because I have students who can be extremely aggressive. So you physically need to step away from the plate, as well as give that space for someone else, and holding that, in Britain, that mind the gap. I sometimes actually visualize the vision of mind the gap between self and others. And that's a big way that my practice has deepened this year, to be able to recognize that in someone else, recognize my feeling, and then to just have no space in between us, and allow the compassion to just generally flow, to be of support for self and other.
Yeah.
And that has really rooted deeply with me since writing that book. I recognize that.
Yeah.
Or
So
chapter in the book.
yeah. So tell me about your classroom. How did you start to work with autistic? I mean, congratulations, we're amazing. But how did you how did you get to work with autistics?
My actual undergraduate was in psych, and I was going to go do some form of psychology, and I had a prerequisite for graduation that we needed to take other classes. So I took something called Exceptional People. And 3 years into my time at the University of Florida, I went, you know what, I'm going to jump the shark, and I want to go be a special ed teacher. It was one class, one course. Thank you, Dr. Schwartz, who's probably no longer in this form. And I remember calling my dad and saying, it's too late in the game for me to switch majors, because I'm going to burn out of college before I complete switching. And he's like, Dean, you want to go into special ed, and you can pick up a dart and a map of the United States, fling the dart, and within 50 miles of where that dart lands, you'll have a job, because nobody wants to do that. Yeah. And you'll have a job. And you're right, I'm not paying for you to go continue, just go do you. And that was it. It was one course, one cause, one condition, and that one drop that changed all the course. And I recognize 30 years later, I still thank that man who never knew, and none of us really know what impact we have on the person behind us, because it's all a ripple in the stream. And that was it. And I've been doing it for 30 years. The average burnout rate for someone in my field is 5. Yeah. I have done elementary school, significantly severe, profound, multiply handicapped my entire career. It's my calling, and there's nothing else I'd ever want to do. It's my jam. Am I happy?
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me about the class that you have at the moment that has, contributed to the book, because you're mentioning different children, and tell me about how they are in the class. How is that working?
So the students that I talk about then, of the kids specifically, one is still in my classroom. Right now I have 8 students. All are significantly cognitively delayed. 4 of them are ESL, which is English as a second language. So I communicate with their families in English and Spanish, and I use both English and Spanish, which has been a great gift of trial and error to learn that. Most of them are nonverbal. Most of them are nonverbal and working on communicating in ways that are not necessarily standard. And the beauty of it, I think, is when, as I said, there's 8 of us, the community that we have together, not just as, okay, we're going to be together. The kindergartners are with me 6 or 7 years. Yeah. And watching the manifestation of the layers of those kids that have been with me for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, showing the way to the kids who are like, okay, you're in kindergarten. I got it. I've been here. I've done that. Let me show you the ins and outs. And there's a beauty in that that allows for them to become part of the community. I'm not sure if that answers it, but
Yeah.
the students in my room will never live independently. They will be either with their families or in some form of a residential care center or day center and somewhere in the evening. So that also changes it. It's the level of severity with these guys is much more significant than some of the population that may be listening right now.
Mm. Yeah, but it's still important to talk about, because even though they are more severely handicapped that, let's say, I am, our basic neurology is very similar. That we still are very sensitive to light and sound and smell and taste. We perceive things in a certain way. We do not lie, we do not cheat. That there's certain things that are the same. Even though as a doctor, I'm in some way and high functioning in a lot of ways, I am so not functioning in other ways. And the same as you have with the children, that they might be nonverbal, and so there might be some ways that they're absolutely not functioning, but then on a humanitarian and compassionate and empathetically level, they are way more advanced than the majority of neurotypical people. So it's why I think it's very important to have this conversation, because there are some traits that are the same, that when you come across an autistic person, there are some, obviously we're different people and we're different places on the spectrum, but there are some kind of like foundational things. We do not harm animals, like foundational things that all of us are the same with, that we perceive the world the same as. You have an incident where you talk about a boy called Sam. Could you share about the experience with that? Because that is exactly what we talk about. Do you remember in the book where you talk about Sam, he's blind? And
so the interesting thing about him was, and that was not his name. I did use anonymity.
You have changed all the names, yes.
Yes. Significantly cognitively impaired, completely blind, very limited sight to even light, and on the autism spectrum. And it was fascinating to watch how fearful he was to come to my classroom, and to watch the level of compassion and innate with wherewithal and innate kindness that was demonstrated to him. He would bang into chairs, he would bang over toys or people and fall over things. And there's things that you can't, I've never taught anybody anything. I'm just a tool that implements and gives opportunity and cause and condition. That all comes within the individual. I supply a baseline, and what you really, any of us, teach is what we gain from our experience and our own use of wisdom and discernment. And to watch my own students over time realize, wait, I don't know that, I can't explain the kid's blind. I don't know what it means, but I know that every time he walks past a chair, he bangs into it. And to have them stop what they were doing, even when it was preferred activity, it's playtime, we're playing with blocks, to look up and realize that the student, that he was walking towards a chair to run over, to push the chair out of his way and give him pass. And to just watch that under the humble vision of, what is the greater lesson here? And where did that come from in you? Like, for the student who is pushing the chair in and is not able to identify numbers or to verbally communicate or to do so many of the things that someone their age level would be able to do, but at a deeper level, to be able to go, wait a minute, he's going to hit that chair. It's my responsibility as just another individual walking it out. Just go move the chair for him. Don't laugh. Don't leave it there. Don't keep playing with your toy. Go push the chair in for him. And the kid who was blind never knew that the chair was pushed in for him, because it's not like he could say, hey, thanks, man, I almost hit the chair, because he didn't even know it was there. So it's not even like someone did that to be like, you see what I did? Thank me, you know, on the playground later, maybe you'll share it was just because it was the right thing to do. And to be able to look at each situation through the lens of that beautiful perspective and watch and learn from my students about things is really wonderful. And that kid, the student is blind, is now gone. The student who pushes the chairs in is still in my room and is still just really a nice, kind individual with no animosity, no nothing. And it's beautiful to watch the things that he'll do.
Yeah. It's so beautiful, and it's why I think it's so it's why I think your chapter is so important and relevant in the book. So it's not only autists describing how it is, you know, from the inside out, but also a neurotypical person viewing it from the outside in, going like, oh my goodness, I have never taught this child has no interaction with other people in any way, is completely isolated, nonverbal, but sees that another human being is gonna stump into the chair, I will move it. So without any underlying causes or anything, but just because it's the right thing to do, they just do it. And that's exactly what I meant, that there are some like foundational trait about autism that is the same, that we are in the world in a different way than neurotypical people. And it's why I think your chapter is so important, to make aware of that. You have another, I would like to read a part of the book, because you have normally when it's like a special ed, it's like look down at and look down, you know, that the kids there, they're not as worthy as the other normal children. But you have a part in your book where you write, I have a real passion for kids with behavioral problems who are in the mainstream setting. My room is a magnet for kids in the regular classes who are often aggressive, are non-compliant, and display significant challenges in the class setting. I pair up with the regular education teachers and provide mentorship for kids who need a place, a way to calm down, a safe space, and a reason to even come to school. It is a real demonstration of community. I cannot tell you how often those challenging kids are the best peer mentors, especially the most significant and aggressive males. Yeah, could you talk about that? Because I find that so interesting. So interesting.
It's fascinating to watch when two humans can engage with each other at a level where egos drop. And walking into my classroom for those students, first of all, there's no peer on peer. I have to prove myself and be that guy. Second of all, obviously, it's non-challenging academically. So it's like you walk in, here's what's going on. Often I've had administrators say to me, look, student X, we're looking at whether or not we're going to move him into a severely emotionally disturbed setting. And we need to know, does this child have any level of compassion or humanity? And the only place we're going to find out is your classroom, because there's something magical. I've had an administrator, there's something magical that happens when you walk in room. And I love the fact that my room number is 101. Is that not that? Really, what a great room
Humanity
number.
101.
It is 101. It's
Yeah.
room 101. And I love that. But it's true to watch these males come in with no bravado. I'm short. I am 4'9", 85 pounds. A lot of these guys are bigger than me, have hit teachers, have become aggressive with teachers, and will come to me and just say, you know, Dena, first of all, you have no buttons to push, so it's not even worth it. Second of all, look at your class. I mean, And I had a student and I talked to him once and he said, I get it, Dena. If I come in here, and the language sometimes they use is pretty epic choice, and act like a jackass, I am teaching them to be a jackass, and it's my responsibility, because me being a jackass in my classroom is one thing. Me doing that and teaching them that means that that's what they've learned and they'll never defend themselves.
Mm.
So I better be nice. And that right there, but
Em-
also to
yeah.
be able to say to a student, hey, can you do me a favor? So-and-so just sneezed, get me a tissue. I'm going to go wipe their nose. And for that kid to say, you know, Dena, you're busy working with someone else on an art project, to go in the bathroom and get baby wipes and wipe a kid's face down of snot and drool and say, Dena, you were busy, I got this, is really beautiful.
Mm.
To be able to see what my students and what the right environment without constraints of ego can do to really open up and channel compassion in all beings for beings, and to send them out in the way so that they feel loved and safe, but also not just how to meet people who are different, but how to meet themselves. It's one of the reasons I love reverse mainstreaming, is because I want people to come into my room and see this is who we are and what we're capable of doing, versus throwing my students out to an environment where they're not comfortable, they don't blend, and we're trying to get them to match into, clearly, and you'll understand this, a society and a place that it's trying to get the triangle peg of the puzzle into the square, and you can bang it in all you want because it makes you feel as the higher functioning adult, well, we've tried, and it makes you feel good to say we've given this child the opportunity, versus saying, well, actually this child probably didn't want that opportunity. Why don't we invite people into our comfort zone and share that as a sacred space as well? And that's one of the reasons I love those kids coming in.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's
It's really, really
safer
beautiful
for all.
Yeah, and it's also such a great gift to that child, that is has, that stigma upon them that they are aggressive and they are, this and that, and they are abusive and all of that. It's beautiful experience for them to experience that they actually have a different side of themselves that just needed the right surroundings for them to step into character to who they actually are. Yeah.
It's been interesting because I had somebody call down to my room and say, Dena, did you know that so-and-so is pushing his wheelchair down the hall independently with so-and-so? And yeah, the student who that I had paired up was an extremely aggressive, most likely to run violent male. And what I told that person is, of course, I know where my students are, and I know who they're with. And I also know that they are very responsible, and have talked to teachers and said, the person here who is uncomfortable with this situation is you.
Mm-hmm.
You need to check yourself, because where's your judgment line? Because if I didn't, I knew exactly where those two kids were. That's why I trust my student with that child and not in your classroom.
Yeah.
You need to look at yourself and think, where does your judgment lie and where's your discomfort?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
And
so
that might be
glad.
why that kid that is uncomfortable and aggressive and non-compliant in your room, because you just don't see it.
Yeah. I'm going to circle back to that one later. First, I would like to talk more about, because what you talk about with inviting people in, you're also inviting farmers in and musicians in. Could you talk about that?
Yes. We have such a beautiful, Hendersonville, North Carolina is a very small mountain community in the mountains. It's in North Carolina. So we have musicians who like to come in. The school resource officers are in and out of my room all day. We have guest readers come. We use our room as kind of just a space where people can come and feel that they are giving back to a community. And it's really nice because those families need an outlet too. And those families will come. Like yesterday was our, and this will kind of put a timeline when this happened. Yesterday was our Easter egg hunt. And I was like, hey, parents, come on in, come hunt eggs with your kids, hang out. The school resource officers came and everybody came and did this Easter egg hunt. And sometimes it's just beautiful to watch and be able to see that the people who we invite in are sharing their beautiful gift, but walk away feeling that they have learned something and that they have been able to share the gift of self so that they're able to walk out of the classroom and be more, I don't want to say revitalized, but I can't find the word. Ready to step back in a world that isn't always as kind and compassionate as it is with us. It's almost like our gift is to remind others how beautiful and sincere life is when you take the complexity and ego out.
Yeah.
And for my students to have a visitor and have some music, but not realize that the gift that they are. They have no idea what a gift that they are. So there's no ego involved. There's just this exchange of energy that happens.
Could you say more about that, Bodhisattva? Because multiple times in your chapter, you talk about the children, they have that pure Buddha nature, the pure, Bodhisattva nature. Could you talk about that? What do you mean by that in your experience?
A true Bodhisattva will, I mean, in real terms, is going to hear the cries of the world and be able to respond without getting bogged down in self and without getting bogged down in the response. It's just an energy. And for my students, I look at it as they recognize and they share this beautiful gift of doing what they are doing without the attachment to a self, without wanting to acclaim it for some progression or for some achievement award or something to go on a resume. They're simply just doing what they do and sharing their pure, natural selves without intellectualization of it. And there's this beautiful, humble simplicity of that I do believe is true Buddha Dharma, because it's the manifestation of walking and sitting and standing and laying down meditation, because their entire life is just encompassed in feeling and somatic and giving back to that community that they truly are. They love each other, and I don't have to explain love each other. They just do, and they accept each other. No one goes, wow, the kid to the left is wearing noise canceling headphones and has a chew toy. The girl to the right is flailing her hands and screaming. But we're all at circle time. It's more, and I'm sitting in the center because each one of them has the absolute space to go, okay, well, the kid to my left is doing this. They don't. It's just, here we are. We're at circle time and we're all together. And that's all that matters. We're just going to take care. We're going to hold hands and stick together. And it's beautiful. And that is truly, I feel, the vestige of a bodhisattva, is just to do what needs to be done and drop it right there. Do what's right out of love and leave it there.
Yeah, you
and then it just channels.
You also have that example where you talk about an incident with a boy called Brody. Obviously the name is changed, where it's that pure being where he's just would you share about that story that you have with Brody?
I believe that I had changed that name, and it's about the student who had autism and was crying and screaming, and she laid.
No,
the story about.
No, it's the one where he was sitting and looking at you, and you.
Oh, yeah.
Could you share that? Because I find that so beautiful. It's just that pure present awareness in the now that he was sitting with, and you completely be taken aback by the way that he viewed the world. I would love to hear that story.
Yeah. And I still hear stories about him. He lives across the street from one of the teachers, and he still asks about me, and he's been out of my room for 5 years now. I was in the midst of just teaching, and we're at circle time and story time and doing our thing, and he kept staring at me. And first of all, when somebody stares at you, whether you're on the AU spectrum or not, you know it, and you get this little lack of comfort. You're like, okay, I'm being stared at. And then I kind of was like, yeah, okay, what? I ignored, thought we'll move on. But he kept staring at me. And I just finally said, what? You do one of these and you push your glasses up. And yeah,
Clean the
exactly. That
teeth.
was so cool. I'm not wearing a mask. Like, what? Is there snot? What? And I finally just looked at him and said, what are you doing? Why are you staring at me, buddy? Is there something you need to tell me? Yeah, I'm thinking, he's hurt, he's injured, he's uncomfortable. There's something he just doesn't know how to say. There's something clearly he's trying to communicate and has no words. And he just smiled and he said, because you're beautiful. What? I'm like, okay. and I'm just stunned into silence. And then he just smiled at me. And I was left there dumbfounded because I'm like, because I can clearly articulate and communicate. There's nothing to say to that. And there's no response or reaction. It's just energy.
It's
I mean,
just, it's so pure. It's so pure. It's so pure, Yeah. And we have all the ego things, going, that stuff in my teeth it doesn't need help, all the other things. And I mean, yeah.
And that's the difference between thinking you're trying to think your way out of the Buddhist box and just experiencing it. Like, there's no more nor less, Dena. You're beautiful.
Yeah.
And I was taking that in. It was a good day.
Yeah. Another thing, you talk a lot about the Four Noble Truths. Could we circle into that and talk a bit about that?
So essentially, I mean, we know them. If we're here in this practice, there's suffering. There's these causes of suffering, and we can walk away from our suffering, and there's a way out. But it's almost like Kubler-Ross's, all the layers of grief. Life is easier if you just cut to the chase. Go, I don't have to go through all those layers and all those steps or all that suffering to realize what's already there. There's just cause and condition in this moment. And I'm not sure where you would like to take that, but
no, it was just I just found it so relevant where you talk about well, you talk about the Four Noble Truths, and you talk about us having a preconceived idea of what things are supposed to be in contrast to what they actually are. And the children in your classroom are not that tied into the ego and tied into expectations and predictions and preferences and all that. They're very much just in what is
in the moment
happening right now, and it just becomes so clear the delusion that we live in when we do think that we can have an expectation and that will happen because I expected it to happen, so now I'm disappointed that my expectation wasn't fulfilled. That in contrast with that straightforward pure being in just where there's no suffering, where there's just what is alive and happening right now. And you say at a point, when we see right into each other's true beauty and soul, there's no suffering. And I really, really love that, because it puts you in a humble position as the neurotypical with the autist. You are the one in the humble position because they have a clarity that you don't, but you obviously need to know that you don't in order for you to develop with the Four Noble Truths. And I just found that so beautiful. Yeah.
I was going to say, nobody in my room feels sorry for themselves or each other. And it's beautiful because they just, like I said, the kid to the left has noise canceling headphones and the kid to the right is doing this. And I'm just smack in the middle, but I'm just being myself, and to love everybody, everywhere, all the time, including self. And for me to recognize, for me, I'm suffering because I'm looking at myself going,
Yes.
gosh,
Yeah.
I'm judging my own self, and they're not judging each other. And this kid has just told me I'm beautiful, and all I'm focused on is what. And for them to be just so caught up in that moment, to be able to do an art project simply because it's time to do an art project, and I'm happy you're painting my feet, and the sensory experience of painting someone's feet with autism for me is, can you follow the verbal direction of take off one shoe, take off one sock? Can you give me one foot? What color do you want? And they're just going, wow, that tickles. Just experiencing the surrender, because there's no suffering unless you choose it to be.
It's
And that freedom
self-created.
of just going, I'm caught up in the joy of this moment.
Exactly. Yeah, but that's exactly the point. It's that that self-created suffering that we have in our lives, that we create such a mess out of our lives instead of just being in that pure joy of experiencing, pure joy of being. Yeah.
They just step right past the delusion of everything. There's like no delusion. Cut to the chase.
Yeah.
It's my foot being painted. It's not what if. It's not the overload. It's just the essential nature of the moment, without, like you said, without the illusion, without the delusion. It just is. And in that epic, joyful moment. And they might not like every experiences that happens, but to be able to come out the other side and be like, well, it's done now, I'm okay.
Yeah. And you pose a question also where you talk about how many of us are actually free enough from ourselves and our intellectual sides to experience that joy of being for more than just brief instances. And that joy of being, or joy of experiencing, as I call it, it's so important. It's so important to really snap out of that delusion state that we are in, where we think that one thing is better than another thing. That's better to have a warm bath than having a root canal. I mean, how delusional is that? There is a joy of experiencing in both. Could you talk a bit about that?
When I think about, I liken it to the second arrow. And for me, I'm not just the person who would have been like, okay, I've had this, whatever experience the root canal is. Now I'm going to shoot the second arrow. Oh, hell, I'm going to whip out the whole freaking quiver, and I'm going to stew and ruminate, and I'm going to roll this puppy right on home. And then I realized, there's an endless set of quivers. I can just play this game forever.
Yeah.
Versus just going, versus dropping the preference.
Yes.
Dropping the thought, dropping the bow, the arrow, the quiver, the everything, and just letting go. Just letting go. I've been meditating lately, and that right there, I had a very deep vision, and I was visualizing the stream, and I visualized myself actually trying to gain ground with the wet sand of the stream. And in my mind, there was a voice that said, grab the root. And as I went to grab the root, the next voice in my head as I was meditating said, don't grab the root, let go. And I simply floated away. And that in that moment was that kind of feeling of surrendering to the suffering, to be able to let go of everything and roll. And no preference. Just
exactly. And also like you say, surrendering to the suffering. I mean, who are we to know what suffering is? Because we have all had lives where things have happened where we would have preferred for other things to happen. We would prefer not to be in the suffering, and looking in retrospect, it was one of the most evolving and giving experiences of our lives. So who are we to know that what we deem as suffering right now actually is suffering? And that's also what you experience with the children in your classroom. Who are we to know that they are not having a fulfilled life just because we are judging with glasses that say that you need, to get a job and get married and have children and live independently? Who are we to know that the person that is moving a chair out of the way for a blind person is not more enriched in their life than we are when we're, out there struggling and creating suffering for ourselves? Because like you also say in the book that, suffering is self-created. Yeah, beautiful.
And to not have the pursuit of trying to relive and investigate everything, just to be there in the moment. Yes. And to be able to laugh. I mean, and to be honest, those kids that do trip over something and fall down will just look up and they're like little cats. They laugh like, yeah, that was me, and they move on. And to watch that is really a profound experience. And you're right. I mean, to not look it through the lens of, are you suffering because?
Yeah.
They're not looking at me and saying, are you suffering because you have deadlines? They're just kind of like, here we are. And there's a beauty in being able to not live in the delusion of the real world, but at the same time, not put our perceptions of what we see reality as onto them and say, well, you're the one suffering because you what? Because you're going to worry how your rent's going to be paid? I mean, no, you're just happy to be here and laugh and come to school every day. And there's a preciousness in that. There's a great life lesson in that it's freeing.
And it leaves us into one of the things that I am really, really passionate about when I talk about neurotypical and neurodiverse. It's that box that we think that we don't fit into as autists. The neurotypical people don't fit into that box either. Nobody fits into that bloody box. Nobody are happy with being constrained and needing to be in a certain way in the world. So nobody are happy in that box. Nobody is thrilled to be there. And I think that yes, autists, we are masking a lot to pass as neurotypical people, but in my experience, neurotypical people are masking just as much, because they don't fit into the bloody box either.
I think we all just need to show up as we are, as the gift that we are, and stop trying to show up in either a different box or say, you know what, I had a pink bow, but I wanted a red bow. No, that's your suffering and delusion. Just show up as you are and be the gift as you are.
Yeah. Exactly.
Without thinking, damn, I'm not this gift. Just, okay.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah. And that part really goes out to all the Buddhist centers and sanghas and Buddhist communities out there, that if there are fixed rules, that in order to be ordained as a layperson or to be part of a sangha, that if there are fixed rules that people need to do in a certain way, and they can't rock when they're meditating, or they can't, stim in any other way, that is limiting. That is creating a box that is not there. It has just been created by the sangha, or the community, or the center. It wasn't there to begin with. And that's why I also think this conversation about autistic Buddhist is so important, because we have a very straightforwardness about the Dharma, where a lot of neurotypical people, when they're in a process and they're in a study group, they need to be reminded about studying, and need to be reminded all the time about the practice, where autists, we don't. If we start to study, we study. It's not, we don't need a reminder. A lot of sanghas and communities, they have a buddy system where you are a buddy for another one, and you check in via text or you check in some way and saying how are you going along with your process. I had a conversation with Annie about that, and where she said that was so difficult for her. She didn't need to check in with anyone because she had been told that she was supposed to do the Dhammapada, then she'd read the Dhammapada and get back to you when I have read the Dhammapada. It's like so uncomplicated. But for neurotypical people, it's not. And that means they put up a lot of rules in the sanghas and in the centers that is not really applying to us because we don't need that. So it's it's one of the things that I find really, really important, that box that is created, it fits for someone, it doesn't fit for everyone, but everybody are uncomfortable in a box.
And the beauty of you being able to say, okay, I don't need that box. It's okay for me to not need, and please don't assume that I need that box because I have this slapstick label of severely cognitively impaired doesn't mean that I need somebody to save me.
Yeah.
There's nothing to save. I'm
Super
already,
yes.
I'm already perfect and whole as I am. And I'm
Yes.
the one who's going to look at you and say, you're beautiful. And I'm the one who's going to move the chair out of the way. And another thing that I wrote is I'm the one that when the child who's having the psychiatric meltdown is just going to say, put your head in my lap and I'll rock you. It's okay.
Yeah.
Without needing anything else from that experience except to say, that's my gift to you.
Yeah.
And just dropping it right there.
Yeah.
And that ends the suffering. There is none.
Exactly. Beautiful. Thank you very much. I think that was all the questions I had. Is there anything you would like to say, like last thing you would like to mention?
Love your teachers. And for those of you who are parents, and I say this with 30 years in, we don't always have the right answers as teachers. But we're, for the most part, there because we love you and we love your children. Use us. We're there to support you. I'm not there just for your kid, because if I'm not there for you, I have 8 hours a day for 7 years. You have a 24/7 commitment. And if I don't put my guideline out for you and give you a space, then your struggle is going to be to try and manifest those other hours in the rest of your life. So love your teachers and trust us, because we're the community, and your kid and you and I are this beautiful team where there's no separation. And that's, I think, the other thing that I find is that as parents, I know you're suffering because you look at your kid and think, what if? Or you look and you want more, but it's not going to be that way necessarily. So just love what is and smile and laugh. And when the art project comes home, love the art project. When your kid comes home and they've been with, on the same EC bus going to 101 for Dena for 5 years, just be grateful, because there's a beauty in that and there's a comfort in that. And I just want to thank all of you parents who I know it's hard, and I can't understand it from view of parent, but I understand it from view of teacher and as human and as a Buddhist, that there's no separation and we really are just one. There's no me and there's no you. All there is energy in and energy out, and it can't be created or destroyed. The energy is merely changed. So let the energy of change be for the beauty and the peace of which it is, so that we can create that drop by drop beauty. And your kid is the greatest teacher you'll ever have. Your kid is going to teach you and guide you. So let them, and just keep laughing and smiling. Just keep laughing and smiling. And send good coffee and tea to your teachers, because we need caffeine.
Bring an apple.
Send caffeine.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciated this. This was great. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.